if you remember in our very first video, I talked a little bit about this network diagram. And so this is going to be our unified 24 port switch. If you have a 5-port switch here, that's fine as well. So I have a whole bunch of VLANs coming across port 1 and a whole bunch coming across port 6. But my other ports, I have individual VLANs going out those ports. So the only thing we really have to worry about is the ports with individual VLANs, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. Because the port profiles on the UniFi software are a little bit strange in the sense that when you're trunking, you're not like adding a bunch of VLANs or incorporating, it doesn't really let you set which VLANs you can have if you have more than one. You just have to kind of set the port to all. And I'll show you what I mean. So this is the login page. If you have this unified network application, this thing right here, once you press this launch a browser to manage network, this is the page that you're going to see. So you have to have an account, and I'm going to log in because I've already got my devices adopted. And this is the Wi-Fi experience. I'm not using any of their Wi-Fi services, so this is not accessible to me. But if we go over here to topology, we can see all the different devices connected. You can see I have the 24 port switch right there, and I have the 5-port switch right here. And I think just for the sake of relating, we're going to be using the 5-port switch. So once we click on the 5-port switch, we can see the devices that's connected to it, and we can also see this little page over here on the right. So we have overview, ports, settings. You're probably not going to need to change any of these settings. I personally changed my device to a static IP address because I have when I'm troubleshooting, if my switch isn't properly connected to my gateway, it's not going to be able to have an IP address. And when it doesn't have an IP address, when it can't work, when it can't get an address from DHCP because it can't communicate to my gateway, it really affects the connectivity of these other devices because this switch is going to be like, I'm really upset. I can't get my IP address. I am not going to do what I'm supposed to. So that's why I set this address as static. You don't have to do this, but if you're doing a lot of troubleshooting, I would set it to static just because it's kind of a hassle otherwise. And if you do set it to static, just make sure that the address is not going to it's not going to cross over with your DHCP pool. So for instance, my pool starts at .10. So .8 is still underneath the pool and it's in a safe place. I'm not going to have any DHCP devices getting a .8 address because it's not in the pool. Alright, so let's start talking about our ports. So this is our 5-port switch. We've got 5 ports. We have kind of like our little legend. As you can see, this is kind of a little bit more advanced than maybe your typical Netgear switch that you might be able to buy at like Target or Best Buy. If we go to port management, we actually get a visual of the ports. And I actually really like this interface. It's just a little bit, you don't have a ton of customization. But if we look, we can see, so we have port 1 connected to our 24 port switch. We have port 2 connected to the desktop that I'm using. We have port 3 connected to a MAC address. We don't know its hostname for some reason. And we have port 5 connected to another address. We also don't know its hostname. And then it says that port 4 is connected to my Samsung Galaxy. I honestly couldn't tell you why it says that because that's not true at all. So I have some names over here. These are outdated. Basically any port if you are going to be using your second port and it's going to be doing a particular thing, you can change the name over here. If we click these ports, you can just change. So for right now, it's just desktop. So I could call this just management. And if we go back into this, so these port profiles are actually going to be your VLANs. So if you notice, that's kind of like, that doesn't really make sense, right? So if I have a port profile of all, that means that this port is going to be accepting all VLANs. So this is going to be kind of like my trunk. I can't set a specific amount of VLANs that I can have on this device. I can either have one VLAN or I can have all the VLANs. At some switches, you can tell the port like, hey, I want you to be aware of VLAN 30, VLAN 20, and then I don't want you to be aware of VLAN 60. But you can't do that on these. It's kind of annoying, honestly. You might be able to do it in the console, but you can't do it on their graphical user interface, which is what we're using right now. So that is a little frustrating, but that's why this port profile is set to all. I need to be able to access all the VLANs. But if we go down here to networks, these are going to be our individual VLANs. So let's see. So right now, say I switch this port 5. I know, if we look at our image, port 5, let's say port 5 is only going to be connected to my Click PLC. So I know my Click PLC is, it's only going to need VLAN 40. So what I can do is I can go back into my interface real quick, and it's like, okay, port 5, this is going to my Click PLC. So I can change that, and then I can go to port profile, and I can select my ICS network, because my ICS network is going to be VLAN 40. So that's how you would select the different VLANs if you had a specific thing. I can show you how to actually make these VLANs. Because in order to be able to choose this profile, you actually have to create the profile first. So we're going to go to settings real quick, and we're going to go to profiles. So this is where you would make a new port profile. So actually, I'm wrong. I'm sorry about that. You go to networks. So as you can see, my shelter network is .1, my STV network, which is the one we worked with in the videos, that's .60. My Wi-Fi network is .30. My ICS network is .40. And if we actually go into this, you can see the VLAN ID is 40. So that's going to be really important. Then I have the list of the DHCP servers, because you're going to want to, you can't choose a specific DHCP server without having them all listed, unfortunately. So that's kind of annoying, but I will go back into here real quick, and I'll create a new network to show you what it looks like. So let's say we're making a guest network. We want this network to be not VLAN only. We also don't want to auto scale. We want to be able to choose our address. So we're going to have this network. It's going to use, VLAN 80, because I don't have a VLAN 80 network yet. So let's do VLAN 80, and the gateway is going to be 192.168.80.1, and we're going to have 249 usable. That's totally good. And when we go to advanced configuration, we're going to want to set this to manual, because we want to be able to choose our VLAN ID. We don't want it to automatically do that for us. So because we're going to be using a .80 address, we're going to keep everything consistent. We're going to use a .80 VLAN ID. This is going to be a standard network. I'm going to have IGMP snooping on. Multicast DNS is also going to be on. What's nice is they actually tell you what these things do. So IGMP snooping improves network efficiency by allowing switches to identify multicast groups. so that only the packets that are necessary for that port are forwarded. We talked about that a little bit in the other videos, and we do not want this to be in DHCP mode. We actually want it to be a relay. So we want this interface, we want this network that we're creating on our switch, we want it to forward to one of our DHCP servers. And so this is kind of the issue that I ran into. I already have a lot of VLANs on here, so I can't actually add any more. So we could probably just turn DHCP off, and it'll still make it to our gateway. It might not be as reliable because it's not technically a relay, but I honestly am not sure. I just don't have any other options because I have too many VLANs. DHCP guarding, protect against rogue DHCP servers by only permitting trusted ones. You can use this honestly only because so we could actually, maybe we could set our DHCP server here. Let's see. So that's going to be the only DHCP server that this interface or this network can use. So that actually might be a solid workaround. I do not want to be using IPv6. So this would be how you create a network on the UniFi software. So we would go to add network, and now it'll show up here. We have a whole bunch of leases. All of this is going to be forwarded to our, let's see, our gateway IP, and that's how that would work. There's some other interesting things you can do with this. Like, I don't think my network hasn't been up very long, and most of the time my traffic gets forwarded, so this switch doesn't actually receive as much information as it would typically. But it's still their software is pretty good. There's a few security features. You can have like specific sensitivities on the various types of threats. As you can see, this is what I have right now. I honestly have not gone too far into this because I'm not super committed to this software yet, but there is more to do here, and if you're interested, you can definitely go a little bit more in depth. And that's gonna be it. I don't think there's anything else to mention about this. This is just what I have. RSTP RSTP. I think that's on by default. A lot of this stuff is going to be unchanged, but this is how you set up your switch, and this is how you use the software, and kind of like a basic idea of how UniFi uses VLANs. So if we go back to this, so this is going to be our trunk port, so this port would be set to all. This is going to be just our Click PLC port, so it would just be set to our VLAN 40 network. We could imagine that this port 5 was the new network we just created, so this would be set to our .80 network, and that would be changed under the port profile. So that's pretty much it for this video. I might add a second part to this later on if I feel it's necessary, or maybe I switch to OpenWRT to just show you how it's done with that software instead. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching.